Three words from the Bible that I really think are important, that I have them in my mind every day, and they're in the Bible hundreds of times. Prayer, faith, and believe. Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. We also look at Hebrews 11:6. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. In Matthew 17:20, because you have so little faith, I tell you the truth, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Give you an example of faith. I was playing racquetball with a fellow about 25 years younger than me, about 25 years ago, and I said, hold on a minute. I got to catch my breath. He said, you need to go see a doctor. I said, no, I just need to catch my breath. And then we started playing again, and it happened again. And 2 days later, the same thing happened again. He said, you really need to go see a doctor. Well, I thank Jordan later for probably saving my life, because when I saw a doctor, they sent me to another doctor, and that doctor had me get on a treadmill. And about 2 minutes into being on the treadmill, I said, that's it. If you can tell what that is, that's exactly what happened before. Well, then they put me in the hospital, and I didn't even realize I'm looking at this TV station with this thing moving around. I didn't realize that was something that was inside of me. And the doctor moved the little plexiglass thing over and says, you got a serious problem. We're going to have to do surgery either tonight or tomorrow morning. I said, okay. I just had faith in the doctor. I didn't have any concern or fear at all. And now I'm a member of what they call the Zipper Club. Where's the zipper down your chest? There's just not a little brass tag to get a hold of to unzip it. And later on after that, I had to get a stent. And then another stent. And another stent. And the only time I went to the hospital one time, and they said I didn't need a stent. The rest of the time, I either needed one or two stents. And for about the last 10 or 15 years, I've had 14 stents. And when I was in the hospital 2 weeks ago, they were doing the test, looking inside, and I asked the nurse, I said, that was taking care of me to put me in, I said, how many stents have you ever known of the most stents a person to ever have? And he said 14. So I realized I'm pretty high up there in the numbers. It's just having faith and believing in God is so important, and it can make so much difference in our lives. Mark 16:16. Jesus said, go into the world and preach the good news to all creation. Whosoever believeth and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. Matthew 21:22. If you believe, you will receive whatever you ask for in prayer. 7 years ago, I saw a doctor, and he said that I had prostate cancer. But he says, it's just small. If you want, we can wait and see what happens. And I believed in the doctor, and I said, okay, we'll wait. About 2 years ago, they said it's time. And I went in for 40 treatments. of radiation. And each time I lay there for 30 minutes in a dark room, I just believed and prayed to God that this would take care of the situation. And I'm cancer-free. It's just being able to have faith in God and believe. And I hear so many times every week of someone having some kind of an issue, some kind of problem, a family problem, a physical problem, mental problem. We go on so much about the problems in the world, and instead of facing our thoughts on the positive things in life and what's good. I've got a couple of things that I want to share with you. I gave an international speech in Toastmasters about 7 years ago, and one of the quotes that I had in that speech was talking about change, and I've heard Chris talk about change. Your relationship with change will dictate the quality of your life. When you face change head on with everything you have, you're putting yourself in position to have your very best life. I've got something that I heard from someone that I wrote down I thought was rather touching. Is the heaviest burden we carry are the thoughts in our head. One of my favorite quotes is, everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end.
Well, good evening. Like I was saying earlier this morning, there was some questions in the Bible class, and I knew once I was challenged on it, I thought, man, I think I do have the idea of paradise wrong in my head, and that can happen. You get your wires crossed and things of that nature, and so I was wrong about paradise. I had said paradise was heaven, the presence of God. It is where the Hadean realm is. You got paradise and then those who are in torment. And I was called out on that first by Jim Bankies and then Corky Williard. So, as I said, I am going to hand off a gold medal. Jim, come on up here. You get a gold. It is hard to stand up against your enemies. It is harder to stand up against the preacher. Gold medal. I got one for Corky too, but I knew she wouldn't be here. And here's a sticker. Good job.
On top of it.
I appreciate it. I really do. I do appreciate the willingness to say, Chris, I think you're wrong. And I knew when he first said, I thought, my mind said, Chris, you are wrong. But old Chris said, no, you're not. Well, I was wrong, and that's okay, because I'm interested in the truth and not in Chris. You may remember about a month or so ago, I was out of town, and Alex had the Bible class, and I didn't know what he was going to teach on, but he taught on apologetics, the New Testament manuscripts, the type of paper they're written on, and I got real nervous because I thought, oh no, is he going to start a series on that? Because I was planning on about a 3 or 4 series lesson for Sunday night when we started this new Sunday thing. And so, luckily, everything he said was fantastic. There we go. So we're going to take a look at the reliability of the New Testament document. Now, my plan is about 3, maybe 4 lessons. Please, I beg you, if you do not find this interesting, if you do not like it, let me know. If I get enough people tell me that, I'll change and it will not hurt my feelings. I know there's a lot of things I'm interested in that may not be interesting to you. I think this is interesting because it strengthens and fortifies my faith in what God has done in order to ensure that we have His Word. Some of the things we're going to look at today is going to be similar to some of the things that Alex said. I'm going to look a little deeper in other things. I'm going to look at other avenues that he did not. It's hard to get a lot of this into one little 45-minute class. But I always like to start things like this with a series of questions. So can we trust our New Testament manuscripts. How close to what we call the autographs or the originals can we go? So whenever I say originals or the autographs, that's talking about the actual writings that Paul was dictating to his amanuensis, the one that was writing it down for him, or the one that Luke wrote himself. Those original first copies, before they started making copies of it. How close can we get to that? How good were those early scribes in writing out? How many people back in the New Testament era was able to send their kids to school? Did you ever stop and think about that? Not many. How many people could write? How many people could write legibly? We're going to see. I want to put some pictures up there so we can see how the scribes of the New Testament manuscripts wrote, and then other secular writings of that same era of people claiming to be scribes, actual scribes, and how they compare to the writings of the New Testament manuscripts that we have. Here's another interesting question. How many autographs, how many originals of the New Testament documents were there? What do you think? None? No, I'm not saying that we have, but how many there were? Probably one. Oh, I'm not talking about just New Testament, of each book, of each letter. Like how many of Matthew? How many of Mark? How many of 1 Corinthians? How many of Romans? So you may think, once we think about that, you may think it's, there's 27 books of 27 copies, but that's not true. When they would write these out, they always typically intended those to go to multiple congregations, and sometimes they would want to keep a copy for themselves. Remember when we were in 2 Timothy, when Paul was asking for his scrolls and his books? I believe a lot of that was some of his notes and copies of the letters he had already sent out. So he could go over it or share it with others or make other copies. So when they wrote that first one, they would probably make at least another copy or more of those originals. So there was more than just 27. How long could one of those manuscripts last in time, their longevity? So when we think about how far back do the manuscript evidence take us, as we mentioned before, for the New Testament, we have over 5,800 handwritten manuscripts of the Greek New Testament. And of these that predate the Gutenberg press that was in 1516, so most of those of the 5,800 are from the Middle Ages, before that press came. There's only a few hundred that reach all the way back to what we call antiquity. In fact, we have some 46 manuscripts, and most of these are incomplete or just small little fragments. We're going to look at a few pictures, and these date to around 300 AD or earlier. And for our purposes, these are the ones that we're going to focus in on the most. Have you ever seen that in your Bibles? Well, you'll have a little footnote, and it'll say, certain earlier manuscripts did not contain this word or this verse. They're talking about these from antiquity, some of the ones that we'll be looking at. So we do have, two or three, looking further back, 2 or 3 manuscripts that go all the way to the 2nd century. 2nd century being from 100 to 199 AD. One of these is called P52. It is a fragment from John 18. Some date it around 120, 130. That's pretty close to the time of John, right, when he actually wrote it. When do we think John wrote his gospel and the other letters? I think the gospel was later on, like around the 70s, and then the 3 letters and Revelation in the 90s. That's pretty close, right? That's pretty close. We even have a fragment. I have not seen it. No one's seen it except for a select few. They found it recently, and all they said is from the Gospel of Mark, and they're dating this right now around 80 AD. I can't wait for that to come out and see it. That would be amazing. The other question I think we ought to ask is, what is the quality of these manuscripts? It's one thing to say, oh, I've got a very old fragment. It dates back to within a few hundred years of the originals, but how good is that copy? When you look at these, I think you'll see when I put them up here on the screen how neat they are, especially when I start to compare them to other scribes and whatnot. Like, for example, when this time era that we're looking at, not the first, but the 2nd century and the 3rd century, what was it like for Christians in that time period? Was it all rainbows and butterflies? No, what was going on? A lot of it. A lot of it. And when you're being persecuted and they want to stamp out your religion, what are they going to do with your writings? They're going to burn it. They're going to get rid of that. And we're going to reintroduce that thought at the end of today's class, and you'll see why that's so significant. So here's the first slide. This is Papyrus 52, P52, I was just telling you about a moment ago. Now you can't see it. I put the scripture verses up there. Highlighted in yellow are the Greek words we actually see on the text there in that fragment. There's two sides of this fragment. Obviously this side is John 18, 37 to 38. The other side is chapter 18, verse 32. What do you notice about the writing? Can you see it? Make it out? How straight are those lines? Pretty straight. How clear is the lettering? Crystal. Does anyone here know the Greek alphabet? Okay. Yeah. Can you make those out? You see the lambda is pretty obvious right there in the center. It's pretty big. It looks like a 2. That's a lambda. That's our L right there in the middle. And you can see other Greek letters scattered throughout. It's a little harder to see. It's old. How old is that fragment? 1,900 years old. It's pretty old. So it's up there. Well, 1,800 something years old. And so, if you compare this to writings from a similar period, which we will here in a moment, we'll see that P52 is of other professional scribes high quality. I'm not going to put it up there next to other professional scribes, but I am going to put it up there next to another scribe here in just a moment. Actually, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that right now. So it compares pretty good. I want to show you, I think I got the name of it here. It's called the Bataeus collection of papyrus found in Egypt. Papyrus was a village scribe, and we found among a lot of his writings, he was the scribe. If you wanted something written down in this village, you'd go to him. So I want to put that up next to this one. Here's his. It's Bataeus 121. How straight are his lines? A little wavy. How good is his writing? It's a little choppy. Some letters are bigger than others. In this one, he writes, I, Petraeus, village scribe, have handed in. You know what's interesting is he wrote that, the same line, about 12 times there. What do you think he's practicing, right? Trying to up his game. It's riddled with grammar errors and misspellings. That would look pretty good next to my handwriting. But for him, for a scribe of his day, not very good. But people paid him to write things down. So compare that to P52 of John 18. Which one looks better? Looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Here's the next one. Oxyrhynchus, I think it's an Egyptian city. I can't say that name very well, but this particular city is where we found a huge cache of documents, biblical documents, secular documents, all kinds of documents. This particular one's called the Papyri 209. It's not biblical. It is called the letter of a prodigal son. Not the prodigal son from the Bible. This particular guy, he's writing to his mom. He's all woe and sorrow, and he's asking for forgiveness. He's incurred a lot of debt. It is a story that was circulated all over the place. We know we found it in other places, but look at the writing. Now, it's littered with holes. How straight are those lines? Good? You think, oh, a little slanted. He doesn't hold his margins. His lettering is inconsistent. Not bad. Better than Pateus, that's for sure. Better than P52? Not better than P52, but that's a scribe that people would pay money to have him write things out. That's pretty sloppy construction of letters there. Of everything I've looked at, and I have almost all the manuscripts in digital form on my computer, I can scan through and look at every single one of them. I have not seen one that looks as sloppy as these other two we just looked at. That's pretty, I think, significant, especially given the day and age when they wrote this and how many times they wrote it. Here's another one. Oh, can't really see it. It's called the Papyri number 1. This is the very first antiquity document we ever discovered. This is nope, that's number, should be number 10. So I apologize. I got this, I typed that up wrong. I don't think I put the 1 in there. I thought I did. Okay, so this, how does that, if you can see it, how does that lettering look in the lines? Huh? Yeah, pretty good. Not as good as the others, a little sloppy. Some who are anti-Christian, they like to point to this as being, sloppy work. Look at that bad, sloppy, scribal work of Romans chapter 1, verses 1 through 7. And not just that, they're missing verse 6. And here's an issue. On the flip side of this, there is a business agenda and a timeline of things where this businessman is going to be going to an event. We have other documents from the same businessman. It looks like, and most honest scholars agree, while he was waiting, this fella flipped one of his sheets over and was trying to write out Romans 1, 1 through 7 from memory. He missed verse 6, messed up a few words here and there, but I think he was working on his memory. This was a layman, a businessman, and in his spare time, he wrote out Romans 1, 1 through 7. That's amazing. This dates, I think I wrote the date down. Oh, okay, they're in the 2nd century. So he's not far removed from what was going on in the Christian realm at that time. And he had, or at least he's heard, about Romans. Papyri number 45. This is Matthew chapter 25, verses 41 to 46. Pretty straight, pretty clear, clean-cut letters. P45 preserves 1/2 of our New Testament Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Again, the whole thing, very straight, very clean. You can read it. Now that I'm actually zoomed in. It's a larger document. I zoomed in on this. I don't have a good quality image of it, but the actual documents are easy to read, even still today. This one, okay. I don't have the date written down. I apologize. P46, 2 Corinthians 11:33 to 12:9. This one is from about the 3rd century. It's a collection of Paul's letters. All of them, all of Paul's letters, that neat, that clean. Would it be hard, if you know Greek, to translate that? No, that's pretty easy. I mean, that is well organized. It was even numbered. The pages were all numbered for us. Here's number 64 of Matthew chapter 26. I put this one up there because it dates around the 170, 180. But again, you see neatly executed letters. We're not talking about high-end craftsmanship. It's not. You don't see any artistic, flowy calligraphy. Like sometimes you'll come across something where there's a lot of painting and a lot of drawings, and the first letter's big and got some stuff around it. That's high-end calligraphy. They didn't do that. Their only purpose and all they wanted to do was to make sure they put God's word down on paper so people could read it and know what they're seeing. P66, John chapter 1, verse 1 through 13 on this first page. If you can tell, though, there's a lot more pages there. Now, his lines are a little sloped up, but his lettering is top-notch. It's easy to read and easy to translate. Now, again, the Christians back then, they were being persecuted. They didn't have the financial wherewithal to pay for a high-end calligraphy, but they did get it written down. And they did circulate it while being persecuted, while governments and groups were trying to stamp out Christianity, burning their documents, not wanting it to spread anymore. So, I just showed you a few. We have, like I said, 5,800, and they all look that good. That good. And we still have it. We can still translate it today. All right, I want to go through a few things we know well, but just quickly. Julius Caesar's Gallic War. He wrote that around 5850 BC. He's an imperial Roman legacy. How well did the Romans know Julius Caesar? Well, yeah, he was Caesar. How well did they like him? Even if they were his enemy, did they respect him? Man, yes. And if you were his enemy, would you like to have the notes of how he won and beat the Gauls out there in those Gallic wars? Would you like to know that? He wrote it down. Would you want copies of that? Man, yeah. And if he was Caesar, how many copies of his would he have written and made and sent and distributed all throughout the empire? It wasn't just a few. We know that they've sent out hundreds upon hundreds. Other nations wanted copies of those too, and they were all over the place. We have 10 manuscripts. The oldest is AD 850, 900 years removed from the original. We have no others but those 10. Of all that was made, that's all we got. 900 years removed. Livy, Roman historian, very famous. He lived from 59 BC to AD 17, wrote the Roman history. We only have 1/3 survived. The oldest is AD 350, 300 years removed. Again, another one where we know they've made hundreds of copies, but we've only got a few, less than 10. Tacitus, his oldest, another Roman historian, oldest manuscript, 9th to 11th century AD, 800 to 1,000 years removed. We have less than 10. Even though there were hundreds and hundreds of those made. And people weren't trying to stamp it out. People weren't trying to burn it. The only time these got burned is when the library in Alexandria, Egypt, was burned down. But other than that, they had them. No one was trying to get rid of them. Thucydides, another Greek historian, 5th century BC, his oldest manuscript is 900 AD, 1,400 years removed from the original. Interesting. It's interesting. One more. I got Herodotus, Greek historian, 5th century, oldest manuscript, 800 AD, 1,300 years removed. If your kids are attending a classical school, or you attended, anyone here go to classical elementary, middle school, and high school? I did. So I had to read Aristotle. I had to read all of these guys. I had to read their stuff. And every scholar, and even today when I looked at them at Sunset, when I looked at them recently, scholars look at this and they believe, got it right here, they believe in these classical works, they read them, they study them, and they take them all seriously. We have 10 or 4 or 5, almost 1,000 years removed from the original. And how many of the New Testament documents do we have? Thousands. Hundreds in antiquity, close to the originals. It is written so well and so neat. And another thing that we notice a lot from like that story on the prodigal son I was showing you up there and other documents that we find here, there, and everywhere else, where there's these stories, we'll find an old one, and then some that are older, they've changed the story up. They've filled in a hole or fixed a problem, and the story kind of morphed over time. The great thing that we have manuscripts that span centuries of different copies is that we can see they never changed the wording. There may have been an error where they wrote in of instead of in, or there was a Greek word that was close to another, they messed it up, but we can find that because I have so many manuscripts to compare it to, but they never changed the story like we see in other things. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of some of the things I would like us to look at. One of the things that we'll probably look at next week is the longevity of the manuscript, the number of the originals, and the preservation of the New Testament in translation. The longevity, how long do you think these manuscripts would last? And I'm not talking about like so that we could see it today, because we know, we see them there, but they are falling apart. How long would you, if you were a librarian, make a new copy and then discard the old one because it was getting old? How long do you think those manuscripts would last before they feel like make a new copy and discard this one? Any guess? 100 years? And 40 years? I was thinking about 100 years. 800. 800 years. That's a long time. But they did. They could last that long. So that means the originals could have held on for a long time. And many of those copies could have came right off the original. And we're going to look at that a little deeper next week. Any comments, any questions on some of the things we looked at this evening? Oh, absolutely. And Luke did that. He wanted to search these things out. And I appreciate him doing that. And what a great writer he was to do Luke and Acts for us. And we know from Paul's writings in 2 Timothy, every scripture is God-breathed. It came from him. And you think God can, in providential ways, ensure that we have all that we need to make sure we have his word in place? Man, yeah. If scholars can believe that list we looked at in thousands of years separating their originals from the copies we have, believe that we have those actual copies the way that author intended, why not believe that we have the actual Word of God the way the New Testament writers intended it? Man, we do. And the other couple of classes I have is going to further solidify that belief. There is no doubt in my mind of all the study I've done on this that we've got it. And we can look at things that are probably written right off from the originals. And I can't wait to find out about this other one if it actually came from an original copy of Mark. Well, it usually takes them about 10 years to put these things out, so we'll see. Jim? Well, they won't be the first. Oh, man, no. People have rewritten it and tried to...
Rewriting it to be incorrect, so it's never understood correct.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely not the first to do that. That has been going on for centuries. You go online, though, and you could even go and look at all the images of the original manuscripts. And even Martin Luther, when the Catholic Church was holding back anyone from knowing the truth, he came across some old Latin Vulgate, papyrus, and he wrote from that, and then he found some Greek, and he was able to create his own New Testament. And man, people all over. I got the whole 5,800 on my computer. If they ever try to get rid of it, I'm not great with Greek, but I know it enough. I could translate it. It would take me a while. And you won't like my handwriting. It won't look like that. But I'll do my best. But yeah. I again, personally enjoy this study. Again, feel free, email me, text me, let me know if this is not your cup of tea. I will keep it shorter, and maybe I'll just do half the class and then move on to something else. That's okay. I will not be offended. So if there is nothing else. Oh, and so he's going to put pen to paper too. Yeah, it makes you wonder how many people wrote out what they experienced with Christ living on earth. A lot. But God chose these four Gospels.
And they were from eyewitnesses
Mm-hmm.
that were with Jesus and walked.
That's right. I'm sure he talked to Mary directly. Interesting point. Well, one day we'll know. If there's nothing else,